So what we're going to do first is we're going to just, with whoever you're sitting near, it doesn't have to be like equal 2 or 3 people or whatever, just break up into little groups, face each other. God has hardwired us to receive and give love, and I want you all, which is really funny, like I'm the most unartistic person in my entire family, so I'm sure that they're mortified because I cannot draw anything. I'm horrible. So thank you. Like, yeah. So I want you all to just in whatever way you can draw like 2 trees. You're going to draw like love and unreciprocated love, just however, on whatever piece of paper within your group. Then what you're going to do is you all are going to talk about what you think and put up here or down here, it doesn't matter on either of these, what you think is the direct result. So what is the feeling or emotion that comes when someone has love or they have unreciprocated love? So down here you can talk about the roots maybe that come from receiving love or from not receiving love, and then the same thing goes up here. So you all can spend just like a minute or two and definitely talk to each other. Like not everyone has to necessarily draw their own tree. Yeah, I see that. I see no pen. No pen's moving. Yeah. Like my mom's going to end up with like this beautiful landscape that they're going to end up like airbrushing on the wall, and yeah. Yeah, so face each other and begin talking. Yeah. Now, as you all look at your trees, I want you all to look at the list on each side. These are just some that, like, when I sat down, I thought of some things. I'm not saying this is all or that they're limited to this, but I think that all of us can identify with these on the board. Is there one that you all don't see that you feel should be?
I said generous because when you feel love, you want to.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, generous. That's really good. So, that would obviously be on this side. Yeah. Does anyone else have one? So, when you look at your list, I want you to look at what comes from knowing God and his promises. Like, are you looking at that list and going, do these things look like they come from God? Is this where he wants us to live, or is this where he wants us to live? Which of these probably makes people difficult? I mean, when you're looking at this, is kindness, does that make someone difficult when someone's being kind to you or you're being kind to someone else? When you have joy or you're being encouraging or you're being supportive, you're stable for someone, you're trustworthy. Those are places where, gosh, it's really hard for difficulty to get rooted in that. So when you see these, what you need to be thinking about is like what they're rooted in. And often it really can be from unreciprocated love. When you start realizing that, that's where some real compassion can start happening for people, but also some real healing can start happening. Because we're foolish if we're coming in this class just to learn about how we're going to deal with someone else instead of dealing with ourselves. So that is something that's really important. Now, when you're looking at these lists, sometimes and you're trying to figure out, well, what I'm seeing is just the result of something. So let's just look at something like pride. Who in here's ever struggled with pride? I mean, it is really easy when someone steps on your toes at work or something like that. So you can look at this and you can say, okay, so pride is the emotion. So you're going to look at that and say, okay, pride's the emotion. This person probably doesn't even realize that pride is what's happening. Then what happens is you go, oh, okay, the way that I'm seeing it is the feeling because they're entitled. So you're going to look at that and go, this person might be struggling with pride, but what I'm kind of seeing is, or, even for myself, my pride has been hurt. And so I feel entitled. I feel like this should be a different way. And then you go and you say, oh, what this really equals is like me being difficult. And so we have to kind of like really concentrate on when we or someone else is exhibiting certain emotions, really kind of what the root of that is. Now, there's also a tricky part where some of these can cross over. Sometimes you can be experiencing something really intense and you're going to share some things from both sides because it's an unfamiliar season, an unfamiliar place, something you tremendously don't want. Like if you're in a state of grief or something, you're going to probably share a lot from both sides because you just are like, no one knows what I'm going through and I've got this smile on my face, but like I'm actively grieving or something like that. So you can actually have both of these. It doesn't necessarily mean it's from unreciprocated love. It just means that you are in a state where you're kind of like right in the middle. Normally, unreciprocated love is like you're losing something that you love. And so you're kind of like grieving that process. But what we see is like they plant those roots, and then what comes from those roots are these branches that stick out. And this is like on both sides. And we see this in our children and how you raise your children. These seeds that you're planting is so that they're going to feel secure, so that they can be content or that they will have joy, and you're offering them consistency so that they can feel encouraged and supported. So does everyone kind of get that? So the difference from emotions versus feelings is that emotion is a noun and the feelings are the verb. So it's like having and knowing. So I think it's important in this very first class to foundationally kind of unpack some of these feelings. Now, in week 2 and 3, we're going to get to 1 Samuel 25 and Abigail, and we're going to go verse by verse. But foundationally, we've got some things that we need to address so that we can be prepared to get to 1 Samuel 25 and really unpack that verse by verse. So I don't want you all to feel like you're sitting here going, wait, I thought this was only going to be 1 Samuel. This honestly could have been a 12-week class. There's a whole lot when you start thinking about dealing with difficult people in our lives and living with difficult people. So let's just kind of jump in. So there's varying degrees of difficulties in different places. You can have a difficult coworker. You could have someone that's difficult in your home. You can have someone that's difficult at school or at church. There's various places you can encounter difficult people. Like I once went on this business trip and I'd only worked the job a week. I'm going to tickle myself. It was such an honor to be able to go. It was in Miami, and they were like, oh, we're going to send you to South Beach, and you're going to go, and you're going to represent our company, and these are the things that you're going to do. And I was like, okay, this is so great. I'd only worked there a week, and they were like, oh, this person's going to go with you. And I was like, oh, great, okay, fantastic. So we go down to South Beach, we show up, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, there's not 2 rooms, there's only 1 room. And I'm like, oh, that's okay, that's no big deal. Because, in my mind, I'm thinking, 2 queen-size beds, and what girl hasn't done that? Like you go on trips and you just all are in a room, whatever. So I was like, okay, no big deal. So, we're up there, and I'm like, we're in South Beach, it's so great. And so we go up to the room, and we walk in, and there's 1 king-size bed. And I was like, okay, that's fantastic. So I look at this person who I've known for 1 week of my life, and I was like, I'm okay with this. If you're okay with this, let's just adult up. It is what it is. We called down. They said there's no more rooms. It was this huge national convention that was in town. And I was like, let's just deal with it. It's not that big of a deal. So there were many things that happened throughout the day, and I was like, this feels like this is going to be a deal. And so I was just like, okay. So nighttime comes, and, I told her, I said, I'm an early riser, but I'm very mindful that not everyone's an early riser. I'm quite as a church mouse, but I will get up, I will read the newspaper, drink a cup of coffee. I was like, you do not have to get up. I won't bother you. I'm very quiet. Shared a room with my sister. I know how to be quiet. So she's like, okay. So I was like, put my little jammies on, get in bed, and I'm laying there, and I sleep on my side. I'm a side sleeper. And so I'm sleeping this way. And so she's over here. And, in my mind, I'm just like mentally preparing for the next day. And I hear her go, Jennifer, I just need for you to know that while I sleep, I need to touch someone. And now I'm facing away from her, and I'm like, and I went, okay. And, I was like, so then I said, yeah, right. Like, what is coming? And so I hear her leg come across the bed, and she goes, dink, and puts her foot on my body. And I'm like laying facing away from her, and I was like, this is a deal. This is a big deal. And I didn't say a word, and I just slowly went to sleep. Now I have to spend a week with her. So I had to make a choice. Am I going to be difficult in this moment that really, it doesn't matter, but she obviously, even going to the airport, she had called me and asked if I could contact the pilot and ask him to delay the flight because she wanted to stop at the gas station. So that was how all this started. And so, but I think we all kind of have like a high maintenance person that's kind of like in our, whatever universe or whatever. But I had to make a choice, was I just going to be like, her way is not my way. I don't want to add to this. What if I had really jumped out of that bed and been difficult in that moment as a response? What would the next week have looked like? Would I have been able to do the job I was supposed to do because I was so focused on being difficult and just being like, this wasn't the way that I wanted it. But seriously, and so there's not enough room really for two people to be difficult at the same time. And you have to make that choice. So you're going to have difficult coworkers. You're also going to have varying degrees of difficult relationships in your life. So that could be a difficult boss. That could be a difficult teacher. It could be a difficult classmate, a friend, maybe like a one and done. You see them while you're out and you're like, oh, somebody has to deal with her, but you're just like, you don't really ever see them again. But then it gets hard when it's a family member, and that's a difficult person that you have to deal with. I don't know if you saw Tanya's post from our papa it was kind of like the anniversary of him passing, and that was yesterday. He was extraordinarily difficult at times. I mean, we don't even have enough time to explain all the ways that he could be difficult. And frankly, he wasn't very nice a lot of the time. He was amazing. He was so great, and he's the most fascinating person you probably would ever meet. However, he was very, very difficult. And so everyone kind of had to make a choice. Are you going to be difficult back to him, which all of us knew we shouldn't? We feared him. But, you also had to make that choice. Am I going to be difficult? And then what does that say about me? Or am I going to continuously pour into him in a loving and sweet way so that eventually, when he's in his 80s and he's in a nursing home, that's when he decides to accept Christ as his Savior? We could have ruined that relationship years ago just by being like, wow, you are so hard to deal with, and just blow up with him and blow him off. But we didn't. Everyone just stayed very consistent with him. And so those varying degrees of difficult relationships, a lot of them aren't really going to impact you that much. But when it's a family member, you have to make a serious decision. Like, are you focused on God and what God's calling us to do? Or are you focusing on it just feels crummy to you and you just don't like it? So what really is it that you're living for? Are you living to be happy and you want it your way? Or are you living to share the gospel, or you're living to be a reflection of God? You're also going to have varying degrees of difficulties and reasons. It might be like a customer service issue. It might be, I can't even look at Abby when I say this, like a health insurance issue. Like when you have to call like an insurance company and get them on the phone and fight for what, you're going to have difficult situations. So there's just going to be different areas. There's no way we could cover every single thing in this class. There just isn't. But we all are here for a reason. We know that we have a difficult person in our life. We have a difficult relationship. For some of us, we might be that difficult person. I would argue at one time or another, all of us have been. So I do want to be clear that if you're in an abusive situation, I'm not talking about an extreme abusive situation. So if you all are in that type of situation, I want you to know you can reach out. You can reach out to our church staff. You can reach out to our pastors' wives. If you still feel like, I don't know if that's the step I want to take, you can come to me, but please know that I will pass that on to the appropriate people as necessary. But this is not what we're not talking about abusive situations, but I don't want to jump over that. So if you all are going through that or experiencing that, you do have resources and we can help, but you just need to let us know that that's the help that you need. So does everyone get that? Like, we're clear on that? Okay. So when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about those extreme situations. So, but like I said, it could be that you're someone's difficult person. Now, who in here is the primary grocery shopper in their house? Have you ever had to go to the grocery store with someone that isn't the primary person and watch them do the U-scan? I mean, I feel like it... I think that is put there just to like test a marriage, because especially when you have like a lot and you're just like, we have like a whole week's worth of groceries, and then the person that isn't the primary person is going to U-scan, and they're like, and you're like, the barcode's right there. The barcode, like you want so badly to jump in and just be like, just let me do it. Think it shows though, like if those are things that like well up, that's a pretty good indicator you're probably a difficult person in one way or another, because you're showing that they probably can't do it. They've gotten that far in their life. They're alive. They don't necessarily need your input on that. But I'm saying that if that's something that bothers you, you realize you're a difficult person. You are challenging. So 1 Samuel 25, what we're going to do is we're going to go over that in week 2 and 3, verse by verse. This week, we're just going to do a little bit of backstory and then lay some foundational work. So there's going to be a lot of scripture. I'm not expecting anyone to write every single verse down, and flip through. I mean, we're not playing like a game of sword or whatever you all called it. We're not getting crazy like that. But if you all could go ahead and turn to 1 Samuel 18, that would be great. 1 Samuel 25 starts with the nation in mourning. Samuel has died, verse 1. He was a buffer between David and Saul's violence and wrath. So when you all go to 1 Samuel 18, we're going to start in verse 6. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the woman came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated, "Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s." And Saul was very angry. And this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day on. That is like chilling to me, where it says, and Saul eyed David from that day on. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, thank you for allowing us this time to gather and to learn more about who you are. Each person is here because they chose this class for a reason. Some people might not even realize why they're here, but perhaps it's a hurt or a difficulty that's brought them here. Whatever the reason, you know it. We offer our minds and our hearts to you, and we ask you to open not only our hearts, but our ears to the words that you would have us hear, not what we're expecting, but what you would have us hear. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So going back to 1 Samuel 18, what is it that you all see? Mm-hmm. Pride, ego, exactly. So let's go on to verse 12 through 16. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of thousands. And he went out and came in before the people. And David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in fearful awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he went out and came in before them. So what's here? Yeah, comparison, fear. I wrote down fear myself. He looked at what he had lost as man, and he was not looking at what he had lost from God. So he took his eyes off God and started thinking about, wait, I don't have the favor, or, people aren't looking to me in the way that they're looking. He completely took his eyes off God. So we can feel this tension when someone has something that we want. Like maybe it's a relationship. I think that social media destroys our brains sometimes. You can look at someone that posts something that might be completely innocent on their end, and it can be like, oh, it's so great, my husband did this thing for me, or, oh, it's so great, we went on this vacation. And there can be like that tiny little twinge inside of you that just goes, that's not what I have. That isn't what I have. And you have to be extremely careful, because that can plant a little seed and can make you difficult. Like I'm a vivid dreamer. I don't know, is anybody in here a vivid dreamer? Like I can wake up from a dream and look at Daniel and be like, huh. Like, I can feel that emotion from just having like a vivid dream. And so social media can really make us kind of look at someone and be like, And so you have to be careful. But then also, like, if you feel those little things happen, it's probably an indicator you need to probably not be on social media. Take a break, take a forever break, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. But that can be a big indicator. But emotions can lead to really loud feelings. And so you can see, like if you look at your old tree that you drew and whatever you all put on your trees, are all of those things on there facts? Like when you look at the tree and you see all the emotions that you put on, like do you feel like just because you feel annoyed, the reason of it is a fact? Probably not. Like you can look at something and go, wow, I'm kind of being foolish right now. Is this a fact? Feelings aren't always facts. Just because, So it's like just because you're feeling some way doesn't make that true. And they can be tricky and they can be dishonest. But all of these things can certainly lead us to start acting difficult or someone else being difficult. And when you encounter someone else that's being difficult, you have to realize, oh, okay, what I'm seeing is just an after effect of something. I don't really know the root of what it is, but there's obviously something there. And that can really lead to some compassion. So like if you're like, oh, I feel slighted, I feel angry, I feel left out, I feel ugly, I feel like I don't fit in, I'm tired, I feel abandoned, I feel unloved, I feel discouraged. These feelings can make people be so difficult. I mean, has anyone ever felt any of those ways? And it's like you put on clothes and you're like, nothing fits right. And, you just like get frustrated. And then if anything adds on to that, that doesn't mean that that's real. And that's something that you need to dig into. Just let it go. Let it pass over you. So you can even meet someone and be like, that person really isn't my cup of tea. But then you go, wait, I think that person just needs to be encouraged. Could I be the person that encourages them? Do I have the ability to turn this around to encourage that person? Yes, you do. Maybe that person just doesn't know how to do certain things, and that creates them to be difficult because they might have pride in the way. You can help them do certain things, like step into their life with that awareness that it's like, I can actually help them with that. Like I would have not a clue in my head or brain how to do half the stuff that Chrissy knows how to do. Like she's outrageously smart. A pharmacist just like gets science on the craziest level. I would have no idea how to do those things. So I could either be difficult in something, or if I was working on something or had a question, I could accept her help. Like he has put her in my life with a skill set to be like, oh, that's so great. I actually get to be with someone that can help me. You have to park your pride or your ego and be like, I mean, I don't know what type of weird pharmacy thing I'd be doing, but, like if I needed help with something, I know like Chrissy would certainly be a go-to. So there's just going to be things, like I said, that people, we see the after effect of something. There's a lady that lives in our neighborhood, and her yard is like this big, the part that's mowed. It's like super tiny, and then the rest is completely overgrown. And then it grew up into her gutters and all of that stuff. And she's an older lady, and she's about 50. No, I was kidding. I did that on purpose. No, she really is like, she's in her 80s, so I feel comfortable saying older. Do you feel comfortable with that? Okay, good. Okay. So, but everything's like overgrown. Her gutters are falling off, all this stuff. And like you would walk by and she would completely ignore you every time you talk to her. And you're just like, man, what is going on? And it's so frustrating because you're trying so hard. And so one day someone was like, I'm going to try a little bit harder. And so come to find out, she couldn't hear, and she didn't have hearing aids, and then she also didn't have the money because everything had gotten so out of control, she didn't have the money to go in and get it fixed. And so then it was like, okay, our whole neighborhood kind of rallied, and we were like, let's all get together and take care of all of these issues for her. And let me tell you, she is like the sweetest thing ever. Now, she still can't hear, but we are completely aware. So what we perceived as her being difficult, we were so crazy off base. And she just really she will see you and she waves to you. And now you know that you need to approach her so that when you're speaking to her, you're meeting her where she is. She can't hear you if you're talking to her. So you have to get that visual and be like, oh, hey, and make sure that you're doing it in the way that she needs for it to be done. So it's like we can get really off base and just see and then decide someone's being difficult, and that isn't true. So 1 Samuel 25, again, it starts with Samuel passing away. David had a lot of feelings. It doesn't say the feelings he had, but we know because we're human and David's human that there were a lot of feelings that he probably had, because wouldn't you agree that Samuel was his friend, his mentor, someone he loved deeply and cared about? I mean, if you've experienced anyone passing, you're going to go, I bet he probably felt some things that I may have felt because I'm also a person. So think about those. But let's pause on 1 Samuel 25. We're going to go further back, and we're going to look at Moses and how he dealt with difficult people. But not one difficult person. He dealt with 600,000 men on foot and additional women and children. So here we all are sitting here going, oh, I have a difficult person. Could you imagine, all of Lexington being your difficult burden? All of Fayette County is who you have to deal with every single day. So this is right before the parting of the Red Sea. Turn to Exodus 14, 10 through 14. So again, this is right before the parting of the Red Sea, Exodus 14, 10 through 14. There's a lot of loud emotions and feelings. And so we're going to look at kind of where their focus is. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. Again, there's the emotion, fear. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us to bring us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." Let's read this last little part again. Just want to make sure that we're all seeing this. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Isn't that hard? Just keeping your mouth shut can be hard. So the way they speak to Moses shows doubt and fear and contempt. They're very upset. Moses didn't take the bait. Instead, he redirects their focus back to the Lord. Think of how many times he has to redirect their focus from their feelings. Just think about it. I can't even imagine how many times he had to say, stop living in your feelings and start living in the facts. We're going to live in the promises that we know. So how do you redirect your difficult person or yourself? Do you let yourself wallow? Do you let yourself get angry with that person? Do you let that fester, whatever it is? Or the Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. So the next thing, they had seen and experienced the parting of the Red Sea, and they sang praises. They were so happy. There's this whole chapter. It's nothing but praise. And then let's go to Exodus 16. Exodus 16, 2 through 15. They had just seen the parting of the Red Sea. They went through this whole thing where they're praising. They're so happy. They're overjoyed. And then, starting in verse 2, and the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to him, Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, At evening you shall know that that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, When the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. Is anyone hearing the word grumbling a lot? Okay, let's keep reading. Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, 'Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God." Isn't God so patient and kind? I mean, like, really, like, if you, I'm not saying like circle this in your Bible, but like if you just look through, you can't help, like, your mind goes to the word grumbling, like how many times it's in there. He is so patient and kind, and then still provides for us. Like, they just saw the parting of the Red Sea. Like, could you imagine just on your beach vacation, you're like, la la la, and then like in Destin, the ocean just parts. You'd be like, what is happening? And then you're just like, "But God, I'm hungry." I mean, that is ridiculous, but that's exactly what's happening. Let's look at additional ways the Israelites are being difficult. And let's not forget, we can kind of even just plug ourselves in here sometimes. So again, I'm not asking you all to turn to all of these, but you can. Numbers 11, 4-6. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, "Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all for all but this manna to look at." He provided. So they're grumbling about their food. Exodus 15:24. But we're going to read Numbers 20, 2-3. "Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, 'Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord.'" They're grumbling about their water now. Numbers 14, 2-4. "And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to him, 'Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?' And they said to one another, 'Let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt.'" What are they complaining about right there? Leadership. Numbers 12:2. Miriam and Aaron. They said, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses?" I mean, surely not. "He has not spoken through us. Has he not spoken through us also?" And the Lord heard it. I mean, that is terrifying right there. That is absolutely terrifying. That's sibling rivalry right there. I mean, I don't know if any of y'all have had a problem with a brother or sister in your life, but I mean, I have. I just think that that's, that's human nature to just kind of, squabble with your sibling. But as adults, we should know better. That's crazy. They have seen and been with him, and now here they are behind the scenes being like, I think God could speak through us too. And the Lord heard them. So again, they think their difficulties are because of Moses and what he's doing. It shows their faith is in man and not in the Lord. I can be a sponge and kind of absorb other people's emotions. And, like if I'm around people that are just like super negative, then it can really weigh on me heavily. If someone's super positive, I'm like, yeah, let's be positive. Let's start a club, whatever it is. It's like I can be that way. I can just be an emotional sponge, and that can be great, but it can also be super draining. And so I think we have to be careful, but it also shows how other people's emotions really start to affect the person next to you, and the person next to you, and the person next to you. And that's what happened with them. I mean, I'm sure that it's not like all at the exact same moment, like lightning struck and 600 people are all like, we all feel the same way at exactly the same time. They're grumbling, and it just kind of like traveled through the crowd. So let's look at a quick snapshot of some of the reasons why the Israelites are being or additional ways they're being difficult. We're not going to read them all. We're just going to paraphrase, so you don't have to turn. So Exodus 5:21. Your demands to Pharaoh have made us a stench to him, demanding bricks without supplying straw. So they have a fear of punishment. Exodus 14, 11 through 12. You brought us to the wilderness to die. They have a fear of dying in battle. Exodus 15, 24. Grumbling. Water is bitter. What shall we drink? They fear they might die of thirst. Exodus 16, 2 and 7 through 9 and verse 12. They're grumbling. We'll starve to death. They've recalled the pots of meat in Egypt. So they have a fear of starvation. Exodus 17:3. Moses strikes the rock at God's command. Again, fear of dying of thirst. Numbers 11, 1 through 6. Complaints about their hardships. Tired of manna. They craved other food. They just kind of instigated each other. So they have a dissatisfaction. They're discontent with what God has provided for them. God has provided food. They want something different. Numbers 14:2, 27, 29, 36 through 37. Deuteronomy 1:27. Psalm 106:25. They have a fear of death and slavery. They're grumbling about it. We can look at other verses. There's an envy of Moses' leadership. There's, again, Numbers 20, another dying of thirst. Numbers 21, 4 through 9, impatience with difficult conditions. Whew, I've been there. Has anybody else had like difficult conditions and you want to get out of that? Could somebody else have, like you're just kind of seeing the collateral damage of someone's in a situation they don't want to be in? There are going to be difficult people in our lives, and they're being difficult for a reason. And I'm not justifying their being difficult, but there's a reason behind their behavior, just as often there can be a reason behind our behavior. But think about like pandemic shoppers. They all ran to the supermarket and everyone like went crazy and got various things, and they perceived through their lens of what was possible and might happen next. And so that's why they were doing those things. We see that with the Israelites. They're just saying, they're looking like living right now in this moment. Oh, I think we're going to be thirsty. I think that's how I'm going to die. I think I'm going to be hungry. And so it's making them difficult. They're just constantly grumbling. So when someone is being difficult, we feel and see and hear the behavior and not the backstory. And we need to remember that. And again, that's where that compassion comes in. So our reaction is going to either be from the Holy Spirit that's within us, or it's just going to be coming from our broken heart. So are you pointing the finger, or are you pointing people to God? So when you have those difficult people, are you just be like, well, yeah, but if you hadn't, or are you being like, it doesn't matter what she's doing because I know where my trust is? So something that came from all of this grumbling with the Israelites was a leadership lesson. And that came from Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. And he taught delegation. And so let's turn to Exodus 18, 13 through 27. So Exodus 18, 13 through 27. I changed my mind. We're going to be there. I'm gonna paraphrase because I'm noticing what time it is. So we're going to be in Exodus 18, but basically what they're saying, I'm just going to paraphrase. So what you're seeing is it's not good what they're doing, and he's basically saying you're going to wear yourself out. That's basically what he's saying. In verse 21, instructions on who to choose. Verse 22, what to do. Verse 23, what results to expect. Verse 24, Moses listened and obeyed. That's important. So not only is he saying, I'm investing in you and I'm showing you how to do this properly, but then it's saying Moses obeyed and listened. So he's learning delegation, but it didn't stop there. Moses prayed and interceded for the Israelites. He didn't walk away because honestly, wouldn't that have just been so much easier? I mean, there has to come a point where you're just like, I'm just going to throw my hands up. I cannot deal with this difficult person anymore. And just throw your hands up. But he didn't. He stayed and he prayed. God sustained him. He kept loving. So what did Moses ask? Moses wants to ensure that they're cared for in earthly needs, but also eternal needs, in spite of how crummy they're acting. So that's a focus that all of us should have, that in spite of how crummy someone's acting, we're pausing and we're praying for them, for not only their earthly needs to be met, because probably there isn't an earthly need that's being met and that's why they're being difficult, but also if they don't know God, that they will know God. We should be pausing and praying. So in Numbers 27:16-7, let the Lord, the God of the spirit of all the flesh, appoint a man over the congregation. Who shall go out before them and come in before them? Who shall lead them out and bring them in? That the congregation of the Lord may not be as sheep that have no shepherd. So Moses didn't retaliate. He hasn't been defending himself. We're not seeing him in these difficult situations with the Israelites going, oh yeah, but if you hadn't, but I would have been able to, like, we don't see like him arguing and just constantly retaliating or defending himself against them. His days weren't about him and how he felt at any given moment. He had compassion and humility. But he also, did he want the job of leading them? I mean, I think that's important for us to look at. Like, did he want that job? So, Numbers 11:10-15. Moses heard the people weeping through their clans, everyone at the door of his tent. Everyone at the door, could you, like, we've all had those things where it's just like, just feels like a constant flood where everyone has a need. That doesn't mean you also don't have needs. It just means that I like in those moments where you're like, if one more thing happens, I feel like I'm going to break, but it's so great because then you realize it really isn't in your strength or your power, but it's in God that's really sustaining you through that, and how you can make the choice, and let me be clear, it is a choice, to compartmentalize and say, God has put me here, but I also need to help this other person with this. You can't just sit there and say, I just have to worry about myself. Somebody has a real need and they're reaching out to you for a reason, and you need to get that, you need to call on the Holy Spirit and be like, give me the strength to help them through this. And sometimes that's a difficult person. But again, everyone was at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord blazed hotly. Yikes. And Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all his people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? For they weep before me and say, give us meat that we may eat, and I am not able to carry all of this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once. If I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. It also isn't saying that he's going over to his friend Frank and grumbling about this. And I don't want to put something in scripture that isn't, but that isn't what the important detail was for us. Like, he's going to the Lord saying, this is too much for me. This is so difficult. Like, why have you given me this much? But he's going to God. He's not going to his friend to discuss this and then kind of have like that feeling travel through. God chose Moses to be the Israelites' leader. God chose you to be a leader in your own life with your own difficult person. Moses didn't want to be the leader. He felt that God had given him too many responsibilities. Remember, feelings aren't facts. He felt it was too much. Nothing's too much with God. So just because he felt that way, that didn't mean it was true. He was desperate. So what did he do? He prayed. He was desperate. He prayed about the matter and he told God how he felt. So it's not that your feelings are wrong. It's what you do with those feelings that can be wrong. Moses had obeyed God. Moses had led the people out of the country called Egypt, but he realized that he could not do the work of a leader alone. He felt that he was failing as a leader, and he was so desperate, he asked God to let him die. I mean, that's some serious desperation right there, but also it shows that he feels the weight of responsibility of how he's leading these people. He's saying, God, I am failing. God answered his prayer, but God did not let him die. God did not expect him to do all the work just by himself. God would provide the help that Moses needed. God would tell Moses what he had to do, and it ties back to Jethro, and Jethro saying, hey, you don't have to do it all. Like we can, I think especially women, like we feel like we have to take that burden on and do it all and be all things to all people, always, and we don't. But that also doesn't mean we don't have a responsibility, but that means that we could possibly delegate, and there might even be a better person that you could pull in. I mean, there have been times where I reached out to Jamie and there was a neighbor that was down the road, and it's so weird. It's like she lives extraordinarily close to the house I grew up in, and there's someone I grew up with that just lives right in her tiny little neighborhood, and that's not offensive to call it tiny. I mean, it's tiny. And I just was like, hey, could you reach out to this particular person? Because I knew that I wasn't the right person, but I knew this person needed to be reached out to. So you have to make sure that you're not just like, oh, look, that person's hurting over there. You know, you have a responsibility. If you saw it for a reason, and you need to figure out what that looks like and who you could pull in if it's not, in fact, you. Or it might be you, and it just might be really inconvenient, and you need to get over yourself. So that's an important thing also, because sometimes we just don't want to be inconvenienced. Like we want that air-conditioned life where if it's 2 degrees off of our comfort zone, we get super fussy. So maybe it is your responsibility, but it might also be delegation. So again, Moses didn't retaliate. What he did is he had compassion and humility. So this isn't giving people about what they wanted. It was about they needed to kind of live where they were and appreciate what God was providing. They had some serious discontent, and that can destroy a mood, a family, a life. God will give us what we need, not what we want. And this will probably include having a difficult person in your life. And something that we can't forget when we're dealing with our difficult person, holy is always more important than happy. So let me repeat that. Holy is more important to God than us being happy. So, has anyone in here learned something from the difficult person in their life? I mean, I know I have. God uses difficult people to expose things that are hidden hurts in us and hidden things in our heart. Maybe it's like you get your feathers ruffled. Then you go, oh, wait, that was pride. I thought maybe I had that kind of kicked. I guess I don't. You know, like you can have that difficult person that's revealing something to you, and God's using that difficult person and keeping them in your life. So don't just pray, oh, I hope I get another job so I can be away from that person. You're not going to be away from your pride because it's inside you. So you've got to get that figured out. So when this happens, you have to figure out what should you do. The execution of these are going to be really different because it depends on who your difficult person is, what that relationship is, if they're a regular in your life, if they're a one and done, traffic, grocery store, spouse, parent, child, whatever it is. I mean, so it's going to be really difficult, but these are going to be some blanket things that we can do. And it's also going to give us like a sneak peek into 1 Samuel 25. And we're also going to look back at what Moses did with the Israelites. So we're going to look at this. I need like a Vanna White so they could come up and just be the eraser person. That would be great. Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a sneak peek and what's to come in 1 Samuel 25, but also looking back at some things Moses did. So, some things that we can do for the difficult people in our lives. Can you all see red on the board okay? Wait, did you say no? I thought, like, I'm glad you said that because when I sat in the back, red's hard for me to see. So, the first thing that we can do is pray for them. So when you have a difficult person in your life, don't just sit there and be like, this person is so irritating, and you're not taking the time to actually pray for them. You don't know why they're being difficult. I mean, if it's someone that you work with, you didn't grow up with them. You don't know how they were raised. You don't know if they had parents or who their parents were or what their situation is. So you have to take that moment to pray for them. We saw how Moses prayed in Numbers. His prayer wasn't for him to get out of the situation, but to ensure that Israelites are shepherded in their situation. So in Matthew 5:44 through 45, but I say to you, Lord, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends the rain on the just and on the unjust. Matthew 5:44 through 45. My sister has cancer. There's no easy way to get that out there. It's a reoccurrence, and I've worked in my current job for 12 years, and I work in a situation where a lot of people are very lost and quite cruel, and there is a lot of egos that run with the group of people that I particularly work with, just because of the work that they do. And it can really make them feel like, frankly, they're God, because of they have the power of life and death at any given moment. And so with that comes a lot of ego. And so when this particular situation happened with my sister, I knew that I had to come up with a game plan at work so that if I needed to go and do something, that my boss was aware and we're kind of all on the same page. And so, we met and came up with a game plan. This is what this, looks like. This is how everything's going to be delegated out. I called it my emergency preparedness plan. Because I like to plan for things, and I was like, why not plan if you actually can? And so then she was like, well, do you want me to let the team know, or do you want to let the team know? And I was like, oh, I'll do it, and I'll let them know the why behind. So I sat down, I started typing out the email, and I was like, without even thought, I was like, I trust God. I trust God's plan. His plan is greater than ours. It doesn't mean I like it. It doesn't mean anyone likes it. But, this wasn't the email. Wouldn't that have been rambly? It's 8 pages long. But, I realized as I was typing that I just was like, really like infusing the gospel in this. And, and I'm sending it out to this group of people that do not believe in God, and they don't go to church, and they're very aggressive towards people that do believe in God. And so, I sent it out, and I immediately, I'm not crying for my sister right now because she believes in God, but I just immediately knew God was going to use this suffering. And I thanked him, because it's been really hard to work in my situation with really difficult people. And there just aren't many openings that you have to really say, let's talk about God. But when you talk about your sister has cancer and I need to come up with a game plan, people aren't as quick to shut the door. And they start to shut it, and I was like, put my foot right there, because I'm going to step into that and keep that door open, and let's talk about God. And, it gave me an opportunity that I have not had in 12 years with these people. I didn't manipulate the situation. It just came about organically. But we have to look for those moments when you're dealing with your difficult people and suffering is hard, to not lose sight of what we're here to do. And it's hard. But I got some nasty emails back, and that is hard in that moment, because you're like, I kind of want to peel your face off right now. Because you have a lot of emotions and you have a lot of feelings that you're like, I can't believe I just told you that this is the why and this was your reaction. And you're just like, it says so much. But then you're also like, wow, broken people act broken. And so I, really knew that there were some of those emails that I couldn't respond to. And there were some people that just didn't even respond or acknowledge. But we all have a responsibility, even if we're suffering or the things that we're going through, to make sure that we're sharing the gospel with difficult people in our lives, even when it's extraordinarily hard. And even if it means that, like, frankly, I cried a lot, and so, like, I have, like, it looks like perma booger, because, I mean, like, the skin under my nose is, like, super dry from, like, constantly wiping my nose, because it's really hard when, people that you then have to turn around and be like, okay, and now we're going to work. And you're just like, you put that smiling face on and be like, we're here to save lives. And, I'm like, but I'm here to save eternal lives. So, it's like, don't lose that focus in your difficult situation or with your difficult people. So the second thing is, this one's a hard one, is to move towards them. Now, this one is, I'm going to say this one really isn't a blanket statement, because there are some people that do require you to have a little bit of space. So I'm not saying this is like a blanket statement and every single person, you just need to go smother them. But you might feel that way. But what I'm saying is you just really need to think about who your difficult person is. Think about your situation. Really pray about it. And I think it'll be revealed to you if that's someone that you are just deciding this person's, I don't necessarily want to be around, or they're being difficult, but I should be around them and I need to move towards them. So again, I'm not talking about an abusive situation, but you need to take a moment to pray and proceed and then figure out what I need to do. If we look forward to 1 Samuel 25, Abigail didn't ignore David or go the opposite direction. She moves towards him. Don't give distance when what someone needs is love. Maybe you're offering love they don't even know or understand. I have a super sensitive heart, and just living in life is really difficult because it's like my heart is incredibly sensitive. I feel like a lot of times, like, I want to just go sit in the closet and like close the doors and just like give my heart time to heal, but that's not what I'm supposed to do. And so it's like you've just got to keep putting yourself out there, and God just always soothes that tender heart that I have, where people are just like, it's hard. Like when you work and you're like, oh, I'm doing 8-10 hour days, and you're looking at someone and they're just constantly saying something to you that's difficult, and then you have other difficult relationships, it can really just compound and become a lot. God always soothes. Move towards them and God will provide for you. So let's go to Luke 6:27 through 31. I'm going to read it real fast. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you. And from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. So the third is bless and encourage. So bless. I do not like this marker. And encourage them. So we'll see in 1 Samuel, it doesn't have to be like raisin cakes. Not a lot of people like raisins. But it doesn't have to be like raisin cakes like Abigail did. But food really is a great peace offering. It just opens up a lot of doors without saying a lot of words. And sometimes, like, our words can get in our way, so we have to be real careful. So a food offering as a peace offering is a great way to bless and encourage, especially when you don't really know how to step into that. You can just be like, I brought donuts or whatever it is. So the fourth thing is know when to zip it. That's challenging, because sometimes you're like, they need to hear what I have to say, and I'm going to take this moment to say it. And you have to be real careful. So sometimes you need a moment. We're going to see how Abigail knew what she immediately needed to say when she was with David. She also knew when she needed to speak to Nabal. And so she used that discernment. So we need to also make sure that we're doing that. We need to be a woman of discernment like Abigail. And we don't need to be foolish like we're going to see Nabal doing. So number 5, give them the grace that God gave you. We can be super quick to all want grace from everyone because we are justified in everything we say and do, but we are not as fast to offer the grace that God gave us. So we need to be really careful and realize not everything's about us. It's not about how we're feeling. So number 6, we need to pray for our own hearts. So the big thing is like you're going to begin with you're praying for them and then you're praying for your own heart. Are you seeking peace and want to live like Jesus does? Or do you want to honor the Lord with actions and words? Recognize you might be the difficult person in someone's life. So you need to pray for your own heart. Now, the last thing is the homework. These, you don't need to write down the questions. You'll see, I've been working out. You'll see that? Yeah. So for your homework, I want you all to read the book of Esther. Tanya's taking a picture. That's a great idea. As a quick snapshot for that, the book of Esther is, I know that sounds crazy, like I want you to read the whole thing, but it's only like about 6 pages, and it's a super fast, fluid read. It's not like it's a hard, like, read Chronicles. So, so it's fairly easy. So I want you all to read it and look at what characteristics she displays. You all are keeping mindful of what this class is about. What characteristics does she display? Who are some difficult people she encounters? What are their characteristics? Could this have made Esther become difficult? What would have been the cost if Esther would have reacted poorly? And did Esther need or receive anyone's help? So those things, like I said, kind of keep this class in mind. Like, we're talking about living with difficult people in our lives, and we can look at Esther and how she lived with difficult people in her life as well. And so you'll bring that homework with you, and we'll certainly review that. But let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for giving us this time to gather and worship you. We just lay at your feet whatever it is that we need to lay at your feet. We come to you and we ask you for the craziest things sometimes. And it's all about our needs. Instead of saying, what is it that you would have me do? What is it that you would have me do in this situation? Keep our eyes and ears and hearts open to the people in our lives and how we can serve you and honor you in the way that we deal with them, but also direct them back to you. As we read and do our homework, reveal to us what you would have each of us learn in our own individual lives and how it shows you and reveals more about who you are. We are so grateful you have given us this time. In your name I pray, amen.